Do you believe that objects can carry memories? Dark memories, ones that they never let go of? Before you answer, let me tell you about something that still keeps me awake at night. It's a story that began with a simple, innocent trip and ended with me questioning reality itself. It all started when I, Ethan Miller, a history enthusiast from Ohio, decided to explore the antique shops scattered across the countryside of England. I wasn't alone. My best friend, Alex, joined me. Alex is the kind of guy who always jokes, even when things get uncomfortable. He's the one who convinced me that old artifacts could hold stories. But neither of us expected to stumble upon an artifact that could tell its own story, or worse. We found it in a dimly lit corner of a tiny shop that smelled of mildew and forgotten time. Among rusted lanterns and faded portraits, there it sat, a ventriloquist dummy. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Its face was carved with unnerving precision, bright green eyes that seemed to follow you, a sinister grin frozen in time, and hands so delicately made they almost looked alive. "Dude," Alex chuckled nervously, "this thing's giving me the creeps." For some reason, I felt drawn to it. The shopkeeper, an old man with watery eyes, shuffled over and said, "Ah, you've found him. Him, not it." That should have been my first warning. I asked about the dummy's history, and his answer sent a chill down my spine. "This," he said, "is more than a puppet. Some say it belonged to a performer in the 1800s, a man named Victor Garrison. They say he made a deal with something, a deal for fame and fortune. But Victor's success came with a price." "Let me guess," Alex interrupted. "He couldn't pay up, and the dummy cursed him?" He laughed, but his voice cracked slightly. The shopkeeper didn't laugh. It wasn't Victor who paid the price. It was everyone around him. I should have walked away. I should have put the dummy back and never looked at it again. But curiosity has a way of making fools of us all. I bought it. At this point, let me ask you, would you have taken it home? Or would you have left it there, staring at you with those eerie, lifelike eyes? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and whether you'd dare to bring something so sinister into your home. Back at the cottage where Alex and I were staying, the dummy seemed heavier than it should have been. When I placed it on the old armchair in the corner of the living room, I swear it almost looked like it adjusted its position on its own. But that's ridiculous, right? "Dude, this thing is creeping me out," Alex said again, keeping his distance. I laughed it off and told him it was just his imagination. But as the night went on, I began to feel it too. A weight in the room, as though we weren't alone. Around midnight, Alex went to bed. I stayed up, scrolling through my phone, the dummy still sitting in the corner. At some point, I dozed off. When I woke up, the dummy was no longer in the chair. At first, I thought Alex was playing a prank. I called out to him, but there was no answer. I checked the kitchen, the hallway, even his room, empty. But when I returned to the living room, there it was, sitting back in the chair, its head tilted slightly to the side, as if it had been watching me search for it. That's when I noticed something else. Its hands. They weren't in the same position as before. One hand now rested on its knee, the other pointing toward the window. The window was open. I rushed to the window, half expecting to find Alex outside, laughing at me for falling for his prank. But all I found was silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes your heart pound. "Alex?" I yelled into the darkness. No response. I turned back to the dummy, anger bubbling beneath my fear. I grabbed it by its wooden torso and shook it. "Where's Alex?" I shouted, as if the lifeless object could answer me. And then it smiled. No, I'm not crazy. I saw it. Its wooden lips pulled back just slightly, revealing teeth that looked far too real for a puppet. I dropped it immediately and stumbled back, my mind racing. Could this be real? Or was my exhaustion playing tricks on me? That's when I heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate, and coming from Alex's room. Do you think I should have left the dummy in the shop? Or is there something more sinister at play here? Let me know your theories in the comments, because trust me, this story is far from over. The footsteps were heavy, deliberate, and unrelenting. They came from Alex's room at the end of the hallway. My pulse raced as I stood frozen, staring at the door. My rational brain screamed, "It's Alex. He's messing with you." But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Grabbing the nearest thing I could find, a rusty fire poker from the fireplace, I crept toward the room. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness spilling into the hallway. I pushed it open cautiously. "Alex?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The room was empty. Well, almost empty. On the bed lay a crumpled blanket, as if Alex had been there moments ago. His phone rested on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a text message he hadn't opened yet. But the room was eerily quiet, and the air felt heavy, suffocating. Then I saw them. Footprints. They weren't muddy or wet, but they were distinct. Small scuffed impressions of wooden shoes, trailing from the edge of the bed to the closet. I tightened my grip on the fire poker and approached the closet, every fiber of my being screaming to turn and run. But something stronger, curiosity, stupidity, maybe both, pushed me forward. The closet door creaked as I pulled it open. Inside, there was nothing but darkness. And then, just as I was about to sigh in relief, I saw it. A faint glimmer from the back of the closet, like eyes reflecting light. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. "Who's there?" I yelled, my voice cracking. No response. But the dummy, it was no longer in the living room. It was here. Perched on the closet shelf, its grin wider than ever, its head tilted in mock curiosity. Its eyes, those unnatural green eyes, seemed alive, almost amused. I slammed the closet door shut and backed into the hallway, my chest heaving. This can't be real, I thought. It's just a puppet. It's just a stupid puppet. But then the laughter started. It wasn't loud, but it was chilling. A low, guttural chuckle, like a voice box struggling to produce sound. It echoed through the house, bouncing off the walls, coming from everywhere and nowhere, all at once. I bolted back to the living room, but as soon as I entered, I froze. The dummy was back in the chair. This time its head was turned toward me. Its wooden hand rested on the armrest, its fingers slightly curled, as if inviting me closer. "What do you want?" I screamed, my voice echoing in the empty room. The dummy didn't move. It didn't need to. The air around it seemed to vibrate with malice. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The room plunged into darkness for a brief moment before the bulbs hummed back to life. And when they did, the dummy was no longer alone. There was a figure standing behind it. The figure was tall, shrouded in darkness, with no discernible features, just a humanoid shape that seemed to absorb the light around it. My legs felt like lead as I tried to back away, but I couldn't tear my eyes from the sight. The figure raised a hand, pointing directly at me. And then it spoke, not in words but in feelings, an overwhelming wave of dread that washed over me, filling my mind with images. A burning theater, screams echoing in the night, and the puppet, always the puppet, smiling amidst the chaos. I collapsed to my knees, clutching my head. "Get out of my head!" I screamed. When I opened my eyes, the figure was gone, but the dummy remained, its head tilted back, as if laughing silently. I had to find Alex. I had to get out of this house. Grabbing my car keys from the counter, I bolted for the front door, but it wouldn't budge. No matter how hard I pulled or twisted the lock, it felt like the house itself was conspiring to keep me inside. "Alex!" I shouted, my voice cracking with desperation. I ran back to his room, but it was empty once again. This time, even the footprints were gone. His phone was still on the nightstand, but when I picked it up, the screen flickered and went black. It wouldn't turn back on. And then I saw the message. It wasn't on the phone anymore. It was carved into the wall above the bed. 4 words, etched deep into the plaster. "He belongs to me." When I returned to the living room, the dummy was gone, or so I thought. The sound of scraping wood echoed from the kitchen. Slowly, cautiously, I approached, my breath shallow and uneven. And there it was, sitting on the counter, a butcher knife clutched in its tiny wooden hand. "I need him," it said. Its voice was raspy, unnatural, like wind whistling through a broken window. "What would you do if you were in my place? Would you fight back, or accept that some things are beyond our understanding? Let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments. Ready for the next part? Let me know, and I'll reveal what happened next, if you dare." The dummy's voice sent chills racing down my spine. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. That raspy, broken whisper carried enough malice to freeze the blood in my veins. "I need him," it repeated, its wooden fingers tightening around the knife's handle. My fight-or-flight instincts kicked in. Gripping the fire poker tighter, I stepped back toward the door, trying to keep my eyes on the dummy without tripping over anything in the dimly lit kitchen. "Where's Alex?" I demanded, my voice trembling. The dummy tilted its head, its grin growing impossibly wider. "Gone," it hissed. "No," I yelled, slamming the fire poker against the counter. The clang echoed through the house, but the dummy didn't flinch. Instead, it started to laugh, a high-pitched, maniacal cackle that filled the air, reverberating through the walls like a twisted symphony. And then, as suddenly as it started, the laughter stopped. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint creaking of the floorboards beneath my feet. I started to hear whispers, soft, unintelligible murmurs coming from all around me. At first I thought it was the wind, but as I strained to listen, the whispers grew louder, more distinct, overlapping like a crowd in a confined space. They were coming from the walls. "Help us," one voice moaned, distant and faint. "He's watching." Another hissed, closer this time. I backed into the living room, my heart hammering in my chest. The whispers followed me, growing louder, more insistent. Suddenly the wallpaper began to peel, revealing carvings etched into the wood beneath. Faces, distorted, agonized faces, seemed to emerge from the walls, their mouths open in silent screams. My breathing grew shallow as I tried to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't just about the dummy anymore. The entire house felt alive, as if it had been waiting for this moment. I ran to the front door again, yanking and pulling at the knob until my hands hurt. Still, it wouldn't budge. "Let me out!" I screamed, pounding on the wood. Behind me, the whispers grew louder, merging into one chilling phrase that repeated over and over. "You're not alone." I turned slowly, the fire poker trembling in my grip. The dummy was standing now, not sitting, not propped up, standing, its wooden legs somehow supporting its weight. Its knife glinted in the faint light. "You can't leave," it rasped, taking a step toward me. My survival instincts kicked in, and I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. The basement door was slightly ajar, revealing a steep staircase that plunged into darkness. It wasn't an ideal escape route, but it was better than staying in the room with that thing. I descended the stairs 2 at a time, nearly tripping in my haste. The air grew colder with each step, and the smell of damp earth filled my nostrils. When I reached the bottom, I slammed the door shut behind me and jammed the fire poker against the handle as a makeshift lock. For a moment, there was silence. I allowed myself to catch my breath, leaning against the cold concrete wall. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized I wasn't alone. The dim light from a single flickering bulb revealed what I can only describe as a shrine. The walls were lined with shelves, each one holding a different puppet or doll. Some were pristine, others were broken and battered, their porcelain faces cracked and disfigured. In the center of the room stood a wooden pedestal, and on it was an old, leather-bound book. Its cover was engraved with strange symbols that seemed to shift and writhe when I looked at them too long. I approached the book cautiously, drawn to it despite the overwhelming sense of dread it radiated. The moment I touched it, the whispers returned, louder, more frenzied than ever. "Read it," they urged. "No," others pleaded. The conflict in their voices mirrored the turmoil in my mind. I knew deep down that whatever this book contained was the key to everything. The dummy, Alex, the house. But opening it felt like crossing a line I could never come back from. Just as I was about to decide, the light bulb flickered violently and went out, plunging the basement into darkness. I heard the creak of the basement door opening, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps descending the stairs. "Alex," I called out, though I knew it wasn't him. The footsteps stopped halfway down. Then a voice, not Alex's, not the dummy's, but something deep and guttural, echoed through the room. "You shouldn't be here." The fire poker blocking the door flew across the room, slamming into the wall with a force that made me jump. The door swung open fully, revealing the silhouette of the dummy, its eyes glowing in the darkness. It raised the knife, pointing it at me. "You opened the door. Now you belong to us. If you were in my shoes, would you read the book or find another way out? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like the video if you're still with me. Your support keeps me going as I dive deeper into this nightmare." The dummy's glowing eyes burned through the darkness, its wooden frame eerily still as it loomed at the top of the stairs. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body was frozen. The book in my hands felt heavier, almost alive, pulsating faintly with a strange energy. The whispers in the room grew louder, drowning out my frantic thoughts. "Read it. Don't open it. It's the only way." I clutched the book tighter, my breathing ragged. The dummy took a single step down, its knife glinting even in the dim light. "You don't have much time," it rasped, its voice dripping with malice. "Read it, or the house will claim you." Trembling, I flipped open the book. The pages were filled with symbols and runes, their meanings incomprehensible. Yet as I stared at them, the shapes seemed to rearrange themselves, forming words in English. "To bind the cursed soul, speak the name of its vessel aloud." The dummy paused mid-step, its head tilting unnaturally to one side. "Don't you dare!" it hissed, its voice a venomous growl. My mind raced. A name? Its vessel? What did that mean? The whispers offered no help, their cacophony growing unbearable. I glanced at the shelves of puppets and dolls lining the room, each one staring blankly ahead. Was one of them the vessel? Was it Alex? Or was it the dummy itself? The moment I hesitated, the house seemed to react. The walls groaned, the shelves trembled, and the puppets began to move, jerking and twitching as if trying to free themselves from invisible strings. The dummy laughed, a cruel mocking sound that echoed around the basement. "You think you can stop this? You're just another pawn in the game." The light flickered back on for a brief moment, illuminating something I hadn't noticed before. A name carved into the pedestal beneath the book. Gabriel. Was this the name I needed? My heart raced as the whispers surged, some urging me to say it, others begging me to stop. The dummy was halfway down the stairs now, its movements deliberate and menacing. Gabriel, I shouted, the name escaping my lips before I could second-guess myself. For a moment, everything froze. The whispers stopped. The room fell deathly silent, and the dummy's glowing eyes dimmed. But then the house erupted in chaos. The puppets on the shelves came to life, their porcelain faces twisting into grotesque smiles. They leapt from their perches, moving with unnatural speed. The dummy's head snapped toward me, its grin more sinister than ever. "You've made a mistake," it growled, its voice layered with a guttural snarl. The book in my hands burned, the pages curling and blackening as if consumed by an invisible fire. I dropped it, the searing pain forcing me to let go. The name wasn't enough. The house wanted more. The walls began to ooze a dark, viscous liquid that pooled on the floor. From the shadows, figures began to emerge, tall, gaunt shapes with hollow eyes and clawed hands. They moved with eerie grace, their footsteps silent despite their size. One of them reached for me, its clawed fingers inches from my face. I swung the fire poker wildly, but it passed through the creature as if it were made of smoke. The dummy cackled, its voice rising above the chaos. "You can't fight them. They are the house, and the house is them." Desperate, I searched the room for anything that could help. My eyes landed on an old lantern hanging on the wall, its glass cracked but intact. Without thinking, I grabbed it and lit the wick with a trembling hand. The moment the flame flickered to life, the shadows recoiled, hissing and writhing as if in pain. The dummy's laughter faltered, its grin fading. "No!" it screeched, its wooden body twitching uncontrollably. The puppets froze, their movements stilled by the light. The shadows retreated, melting back into the walls. But the victory was short-lived. The dummy lunged at me, faster than I thought possible. I swung the lantern, the glass shattering on impact and sending flames spilling across the floor. The fire spread quickly, licking at the walls and shelves. The house groaned, as if alive and in pain. "You'll burn with us," the dummy shrieked, its voice filled with rage and fear. I stumbled backward, tripping over a fallen puppet. The heat was unbearable, the air thick with smoke. The flames roared louder, engulfing the shelves and consuming the sinister puppets that once loomed so menacingly. The heat was suffocating, and the smoke burned my lungs, but adrenaline pushed me forward. My eyes darted around the room, searching for any way out. The dummy stood in the middle of the chaos, its wooden body charred but still defiant. "You think fire can destroy me?" it rasped, its voice guttural and filled with rage. "I've survived centuries. I am eternal." The door was nowhere to be seen. It had disappeared, swallowed by the living walls of the house. Panic surged through me, but then I remembered the book. It lay on the floor, half-burned but still pulsing with that strange, otherworldly energy. I grabbed it, ignoring the searing heat. The runes on its remaining pages glowed faintly, as if urging me to act. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, my eyes landing on a spell inscribed in jagged, unfamiliar script. The words were incomprehensible, but something inside me knew what they meant. "By flame and light, I sever the bond, releasing the cursed soul to the abyss." I shouted the incantation, my voice cracking but resolute. The dummy let out a blood-curdling scream, its body convulsing violently. Its glowing eyes flickered and dimmed, the light within them snuffed out like a candle in the wind. The house trembled, the walls cracking and groaning as if in agony. The puppets and shadows disintegrated, their forms dissolving into ash. The oppressive energy that had filled the air began to dissipate, replaced by an eerie silence. I stumbled toward the stairs, the flames now a wall of fire blocking my path. My vision blurred, and my strength waned. Was this how it would end? Just as I was about to collapse, a blinding light filled the room. It was warm, comforting, a stark contrast to the house's malevolent energy. A figure stepped forward, shrouded in white. "Your courage has broken the curse," the figure said, their voice gentle yet commanding. "But the house demands a price." Before I could respond, the light engulfed me, pulling me away from the fire and into the cool night air. I gasped for breath, my body trembling as I realized I was outside. The house was gone. In its place was a barren, charred patch of earth. I looked down and saw the book in my hands, now completely blackened and lifeless. It felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of everything that had transpired. I thought about destroying it, but something told me it wasn't over yet. The whispers were gone, but a single thought lingered in my mind. The curse never truly ends. It only passes to another. Days later, I returned home, hoping to forget the nightmare. But one evening, as I sat in my living room, I noticed something on my shelf that I hadn't placed there. A dummy. Its wooden face bore a sinister grin, its eyes glinting faintly in the dim light. I froze, my blood running cold as a familiar voice whispered in my ear. "You didn't think it was over, did you? Would you have taken the book with you, or left it behind? Tell me in the comments. If you enjoyed this terrifying tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves creepy stories. Your support keeps the horror alive."